All right, welcome back to the assassination investigations of the JFK assassination. It's 30 July. This is video number 89. And we're going to get back on my favorite topic that I've come across in the whole entire JFK assassination is the FBI investigation of Albert Osborne. And it's been a while since I've done another video on this, but I get so busy with other stuff. But I absolutely love this topic. One of the things I love about this is that, one, the FBI became totally obsessed with this guy within like 3 weeks of the assassination. Who was this guy? Why is he pretending to be two people? He was sitting by Oswald. He's obviously connected with some kind of right-wing organization. They were all over it. They really thought they had something, which they probably did. And so I love that the FBI used their skills and, they zeroed in on this guy, which they should have, okay? Something was going on with this guy that the FBI wasn't privy to, and they wanted to know who the hell he is. Why is he sitting by Oswald? Why is he going to Mexico City all the time? Mexico. Something just didn't sit right with them about that. And you can tell because, like I said, we've got 50-something pages, and that's just what they've released. Multiple FBI offices all around the country sending out agents to track people down, to interview people, to interview him. Alabama, Tennessee, Texas. They're even using confidential informants in Mexico City in the Mexican police, okay? So they definitely were interested in this guy. Now, I find it strange that if the Warren Commission was trying to prove that it was Oswald and Oswald alone, why did they even bother printing these 52 pages of FBI documents that they got from the FBI? Somebody in the Warren Commission said, hey, there's something else going on here, and we don't want to look like a bunch of fucking idiots, so we're going to include this stuff and then just say, oh, we couldn't come to any firm conclusion on it, which is what they do. All of a sudden, the FBI, when the Warren Commission takes over, the FBI drops their investigation. They just hand them what they had. The Warren Commission, tucks these memos with no explanation. They didn't even subpoena Albert Osborne, okay? But they put him in there just so they won't get caught with their pants down. Because, like I said, Albert Osborne, there's this mysterious call to the Grimsby, in the UK, Grimsby newspaper, the morning of the 22nd, to tell them to watch the news from Dallas that afternoon. And then when the assassination occurred, the reporter remembered getting that call and contacted the Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard went and found out that the call came from a phone booth near the newspaper in Grimsby. Albert Osborne was originally from Grimsby, but hadn't been in Grimsby in 20, 30 years. And the morning of the assassination, he had showed up a couple of days before in Grimsby to visit his brother and sister. It's very, very strange. So Albert Osborne also was on the bus with Oswald from Laredo to Mexico City. He frequently traveled to Mexico. And all of a sudden, the day after Oswald leaves, he leaves on the same day as Oswald and arrives back in the U.S. on the 3rd of October, which he goes straight to New Orleans to the Canadian Embassy and orders a new passport. Okay? The same day Oswald hasn't even gotten back to Dallas, where he has moved his family. Oswald's not even working. And Osborne goes immediately from Mexico to New Orleans and applies for a new passport. And on the passport, he lists this hotel, okay, that's come into play with these right-wing groups. Many of them had been staying there or working there when they passed through New Orleans. It was a well-known spot for them to stay and to work. He said he worked there. They could never find anybody that said he worked there. So this is why the FBI zeroed in on this guy. That they're probably thinking, oh, he could be a foreign agent. He's Canadian. Maybe he's working with the Russians. Maybe he's working with the Cubans. So they're pursuing it on that angle. They don't know that Johnson is wanting to squash anything that leads back to the Cubans or the Russians so he doesn't have to go fight them or invade Cuba and start World War III. It has to end. It starts with Oswald, it ends with Oswald. That's what Johnson wants. Okay? Whether Johnson's in on the plot or not, I don't know. But I find it very interesting that the FBI would expend so many resources. You think about, you got two agents, you put them in a car for a day or two, and they've got to go out and interview someone. You're paying them by the day, you're paying for their food, their hotel, the gas, the rental car. Their time that they could be pursuing other things, they're chasing after this guy who sat beside Oswald on the bus to Mexico City. Why? And not just one or two agents, probably close to about 20 different agents, okay? Because they go after people in Atlanta, they're interviewing people in Tennessee and Memphis, in Knoxville, in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Louisiana. They go numerous times, and then in Texas itself. So what would cause the FBI, they're professionals, but they have a budget, limited resources. You can't go after everything. So you go after the most important things, right? You direct your resources to what's going to help most likely get people arrested and get a conviction. So why are they expending all these resources and manpower to go after this minister, this 70-year-old minister, okay? And why is Osborne, and I find that interesting that his name is Osborne and Oswald's name is Oswald, okay? Another thing they found out, and we're going to read it on this later, and I don't even know how they would even get close to knowing this, okay? But they go and interview the printer where Oswald got his hands off a cube of flyers made, okay, those yellow flyers. Come to find out, the order was ordered and paid for by an Albert Osborne. Now, whether that's the same Albert Osborne, I don't know. My question is, how would the FBI even know to go there and ask about Albert Osborne? Maybe they were pursuing the flyer angle on Oswald and come across the name Albert Osborne. Totally crazy, but everything gets shut down right after that. As soon as they find that, everything ends. There's no more. There might have been more investigation, but there's no more paperwork forwarded to the Warren Commission. And I'm sure if there was, and there were more connections, the Warren Commission would be like, no, enough. We don't want to know. It starts and ends with Oswald. That's it. But I just find it very fascinating, and apparently the FBI and the Warren Commission found it fascinating too. I wanted to mention that, is it Richard Russell was on the Warren Commission, and he was from Georgia. Yeah, it was Richard Russell. He was a senator from Georgia, did not want to be on the Warren Commission because he thought Warren was too liberal, a liberal Republican, okay, with this voter rights legislation. Also, he was politically savvy to know that if he was sitting on any kind of commission with this liberal, it wouldn't help him in his re-election in the racist South, okay? So that was one thing also. So it could be, and Richard Russell said there's no way in hell that Oswald could have done the shooting, okay? So it could be that Richard Russell and Hal Boggs, okay, the two kind of rebels on the whole thing, wanted to have this included, maybe an aide. I don't know how they found out about this stuff. Maybe one of their investigators or an aide came across this and say, hey, look at this. And then they said, what the fuck? Okay. Yeah, let's include this because we don't want to get caught with our pants down later on. But I find it fascinating. But anyway, we're going to go on. It says, Bowen stated that he was, now this is Bowen being interviewed by the FBI, stated that he never stayed in Texmelucan, Mexico, adding that he has only been there on his way to Mexico City. Now, Albert Osborne is this English-Canadian guy, okay? He was born in England but served in the Canadian Army, and then now he's living in the U.S. And so Albert Osborne takes on the name of this other minister that was doing what he was doing, and they cross paths, missionary work in Mexico City, named Bowen. And Bowen was getting certain donations from certain people around the country to help him with his missionary work. And then when Bowen died, Albert Osborne took on his name to continue getting those donations. But the strange thing is that at one meeting with an FBI agent, say in Texas, he's identifying himself as Albert Osborne. At another meeting with an FBI agent, say in Mississippi, he's identifying himself as Bowen. Eventually he comes around and admits what happened. But I find it fascinating. Why would someone do that? Why would someone lie to the FBI like that? You know, assuming someone's identity is illegal. Taking money that was intended for them is illegal. Why isn't this guy arrested? Lying to an FBI agent? My God. You know, how many of Trump's people went to jail just for lying to an FBI agent? You know? So, anyway. It says, Bowen stated that he never stayed, he denied being interviewed in Mexico by anyone and denied ever using a dual identity or having ever been in any other foreign country. See, so he's lying right there to the FBI. He further stated that he has never used the name Albert Osborne. He knows a man by that name who is also a preacher and a missionary in Mexico. He last saw Osborne in Mexico City in mid-summer of 1963. And he and Osborne were last together in Osaka, Mexico in 1959. So wait a minute. He saw him in midsummer 1963, but he didn't say hello to him or something? That's weird. he added that he and Osborne looked very much alike and were often mistaken for each other in Mexico City. Wow. Or in Mexico. All right. Bowen stated that during his travels in Mexico, he always stays with pastors and Christian people and sometimes does the same thing in the United States. He could not furnish names of people in the United States with whom he had stayed, explaining that he just could not remember their names. Well, most likely is that he's using his name Albert Osborne, and they wouldn't know him by Bowen. There was another thing that Bowen was, or the identity of Bowen was denied entry into Mexico City, or into Mexico. Apparently he had gotten caught doing something and they threw him out of the country and deported him. So what he does is he goes down as Osborne when he crosses the border, and then he uses the name Bowen when he's in Mexico. All right. And so to me, all this is like highly illegal what the guy's doing, very suspicious. But the FBI, they just interview him several different times, and then boom, the whole investigation stops. Everything fucking ends. He's not arrested for fraud or identity theft. All the things that we all would be arrested for, just one of these things. Lying to the FBI, nothing. Okay? All right. So you see here, he uses the name Bowen when he's in Mexico, and uses the name Albert Osborne when he's in the United States and to get across the border into Mexico. Because see here, he identifies people that know him as Bowen, like in Veracruz, Mexico City, and Veracruz there. He added that Cox and Ingram are both listed in the directory in Mexico City. He also knows the man in charge of the Bible Society in Mexico City, however, cannot recall his name. He stated that he visits other cities in Mexico, however, could not recall all of the names. Bowen also was again exhibited photograph of Oswald and reiterated that he could not identify Oswald as being the same person on the bus with him on September 26, 1963. See, this is where he messes up, because he admits that his name is Bowen, and he sat by Oswald on the bus, or that he was on the bus. But the records don't show that Bowen crossed over on the bus. They show it was Osborne, okay? And he has never seen him at any time. When confronted with the fact that the three other people of the same bus identified him and Oswald as being seated in the same seat, he stated that he was saying only what he knew, and that possibly other people are not being truthful. So he's saying they're lying. When queried about his background, Bowen stated that he organized the Boys Club in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1934, now known as the Boys Club of America. Thank you. And then at this point, Bowen was pressed for his full background, specific details regarding his activities since September 1st, names of friends and relatives and people he has visited, etc., and he became very indignant. He stated that he had furnished all this information to the Birmingham FBI and did not have to furnish it again. He stated that he did not understand why the FBI was interviewing him everywhere he went, and wanted to know what he was being charged with, as he might get a lawyer. He was advised that he was not being charged with anything and was not under arrest, which I don't understand. At this point, he stated he did not want to make any further statements. When asked whether he intended to go back to Laredo, he stated he did not know and refused to say where he was going. Of course, they busted him. Okay? All right, so we're up to February 20th, 1964. All right. Oscar Farino, owner St. Anthony Hotel, Laredo, Texas, advised that He recalls John Howard Bowen staying at this hotel in October and November 1963. However, he did not recall the dates, and his records would not show inasmuch as a typewriter belonging to Bowen was stolen from his room, and he, Farino, paid Bowen $30 for the loss of the typewriter. He did not actually give Bowen $30, but let him stay in the room for free, which would be about 15 days for that amount of money. Wow, only $2 a day. In view of this, he did not record Bowen's name on the register. In checking his records further, he noted that Bowen stayed at the St. Anthony Hotel 3 nights in December 1963, commencing on December 29th. Farino added that Bowen checked out of the hotel at 7 a.m., February 17, 1964, and did not say where he was going. All right. It said the following investigation was conducted by Special Agent Fred Lee at Eagle Pass, Texas. On February 18th, wait a minute, hold on one second. February 17th, so the next day, Reverend Walter L. Haluchan, minister of Pentecostal Church of God, advised that on about February 8th, he had received an undated letter from Albert Osborne, who he knows as John Howard Bowen. Wow. So, the minister is admitting that both are the same. Return address of the letter was Albert Osborne, Emilio Carranza, Texmula, Mexico. In this letter, Osborne indicated that on about December 20th, he had returned to Texmulacan after preaching for some time in England, Spain, northern France, and North Africa. So so he's admitting that he had gone to England, right there. Right around, that would have been right around the same time, right? Osborne did not indicate in his letter the length of time he had spent in Europe, but did indicate he expected to remain in Texmulacan for some time. Reverend Luchan advised he could not furnish any additional information concerning the whereabouts or travel plans of Osborne. That's pretty good for, a minister that gets all his money from donations. Anyway. It wouldn't be against the FBI's, the CIA's standard protocol to use journalists, missionaries, social workers, salesmen, tradesmen that travel around the world, or even oilmen, as informants or people that provide information to the CIA about the host country they go to. Would be the first time. All right. Reverend James Timmons, this is 2 days later, advised he has known Osborne since about 1944. Timmons advised he has not seen Osborne for some 2 years and does not know anything concerning his present whereabouts or activities. Timmons indicated that he recently sent a letter to Osborne with the return address of Eagle Pass, Post Office Box 517, but that he had not received any reply to this letter. Timmons continued by stating that in the past, Osborne had frequently visited Reverend Joe Amarine, Missionary Secretary, Southern Baptist Convention, Alice, Texas. Further, Mr. Timmons described Osborne as a person who acted mysteriously and secretively, and that to his knowledge had not attended any ministerial school, and his only affiliation with any religious group was the Plymouth Brothers, which he described as an English non-denominational sect. Another interesting thing to note is that in New Orleans, many of the players there were ministers or pretend ministers or stuff like that. I mean, even David Ferry was some kind of minister, some kind of Orthodox Catholic, whatever he called it. And I believe one of the associates of David Ferry was some kind of minister or became a rabbi or something like that. It was very interesting. It says Dallas T5 reported the following information. So this is a number for a classified, or excuse me, a confidential informant. Dr. and Mrs. John McFarland, 7A Riversdale Road, Liverpool, England, were contacted by Detective Inspector William Beestall of the Liverpool City Constabulary on February 12, 1964. The McFarlands viewed photos of Albert Osborne and John Howard Bowen. They definitely identify the photo of Osborne taken in October 1963 as being identical with a man they previously described who sat next to Oswald on the bus trip into Mexico on September 26, 27, 1963. They were not that positive in identifying the other photos, however. You see? So, not only the Australian girls identified Osborne as sitting by Oswald on the bus, but now you got these two English people doing the same thing. I have to say, though, people have a lot better memory than I would, because if I sat on a bus, let's see, October, November, December, January, February, 5 months ago, and would I remember what someone looked like that sat on a bus 5 months ago? I don't know. You know. Mrs. M.C. McFarland stated that she remembered Osborne as speaking with a slight North England accent, and when she questioned Osborne if he had ever been to England, he replied in the negative, stating that his mother was English. She was led to believe by Osborne that he was an American citizen, and he traveled to Mexico extensively, as he appeared to know intimately the countryside they were passing through while on the bus trip from Nuevo Laredo to Mexico City. Both the McFarlands were specifically questioned as to whether they had any knowledge of previous trips Oswald made to Mexico, and they replied they were under the impression Oswald had never been to Mexico before because he appeared to be completely ignorant about the country and the language. So, again, this is, I think, what the role is of Albert Osborne. You know, he is a handler. He's been given the task, hey, we'll give you $500 if you walk this guy down to Mexico City, help him get on the right bus, cross the border, show him where the Mexican or the Cuban and the Russian embassy is at, and then get him checked into his hotel. All right. It says, the Hotel Cuba never came into their conversation with either Oswald or Osborne. Mrs. McFarland stated Osborne was carrying a haversack-type bag containing canned food, and she was under the impression he was returning to some sort of school or mission in Mexico, and she believed it was in Cuernavaca. On February 15, 1964, Detective Sergeant Standish, Grimsby Police, England, conducted an investigation interviewing the relatives of Albert Osborne in the Grimsby area. The persons interviewed were Walter Osborne, who resides in an old people's home in Grimsby, and is Albert Osborne's brother. The other individual interviewed was Mrs. Lily Featherstone, sister to Albert Osborne, who resided at Station Road, Greatcoats, Lincolnshire, and is a rural district outside of Grimsby. Both Walter and Mrs. Featherstone immediately identified all photographs as being that of their brother Albert. They stated that Albert was born in Grimsby and left England as a young man with a Lincolnshire Army regiment for Gibraltar and Bermuda. This was some time prior to World War I, as by the time he was in Canada and studied for the ministry and served as a chaplain in the Canadian Army during the period of 1914 to 1918. They stated it was almost 40 years before Albert returned to England, but that very little was actually known of his life. He corresponded infrequently with them, and they had heard he was married and had a son, but had no idea of the present whereabouts of them. They did state, however, that from approximately the last 5 years, they have used the address and the corresponding with him as Albert Osborne, care of John Bowen, right there, P.O. Box 308, Laredo, Texas. So what he did is he just took over, he got his key, okay, and as long as the rent's paid, no one's going to care, okay? So he took over John Bowen's P.O. Box in Laredo. All right. Now this is very important. It says right here, and they continued to use the address until Albert suddenly appeared in Grimsby in early November 1963. Now remember, we went over how he left Mexico around the same time Oswald did, and Oswald went to Dallas, and Albert went straight to New Orleans, to the Canadian consulate, applied for a new passport. And then in November, around the time of the assassination, shows up where he hasn't been in like 40 years. According to Walter Osborne, Albert traveled to Prestwick, Scotland, in the company of a group of scientists who were going to Iceland to photograph a volcano which has emerged there from the ocean. It is not known whether he got off the plane in Prestwick before or after the expedition did the photographing in Iceland. However, he traveled overnight by train from Prestwick and arrived early in the morning at Mrs. Featherstone's home. He remained there 4 or 5 days and then left for London, stating he was going to Spain. Mrs. Featherstone then received a letter dated December 14th, 1963, postmarked New York City, in which Albert stated he had arrived back in the United States at New York on 5 December. So maybe he's meeting his handler in New York for 8 days or 9 days, I'm not sure. Walter stated that he had heard from Albert by letter postmarked Mexico, January 8th, 1963, in which Albert used the following return address: Emilio Carranza, 4A Texmulican, Mexico City. He said that he had destroyed that envelope so that it was not possible for Sergeant Sanders to determine whether the letter had been sent. So he gets around quite a bit for a 70-year-old poor minister. All right, here we go. It says, neither Walter Osborne nor Mrs. Featherstone was able to shed any light on the name of John H. Bowen, except that Albert had told them in the past to write to him care of that name in Laredo. They had never heard of him mention Bowen in any of these letters or in conversations with him. Mrs. Featherstone advised, however, that she was a sister, she has a sister, a Mrs. Ada Amos, who resides on Manchester Street, Gary, Indiana, and it is the only other relative she has who resides in the United States. She added she does not think Mrs. Amos and Albert have been in close contact over the years, as Mrs. Amos visited them in Grimsby a few years ago, and at that time advised she had seen or heard very little from her brother Albert, although they were in the same country. Dallas T5 also furnished photographs of certified copy of an entry of the birth given at General Register Office, Somerset House, London, application number 514371. This document reflects a birth in the district of Caister, sub-district of Great Grimsby, in the county of Lincoln, England, on the 12th day of November, 1888. Wow. At 106 Oxford Street, Newquay, England, the baby is reflected as a boy named Albert, father James Osborne, mother Emily Osborne, formerly Cole, with the birth having been recorded December 1888. Wow, so the guy was old. And like I said, if you're using an old guy, an old minister, passing through, international borders, nobody's going to pay that much attention to him, okay? Because they're looking for a young CIA agent, late 20s, early 30s. So a minister, especially an old guy, is just not going to ring any bells, okay? On February 26, 1964, Mrs. Ada Amos, 3353 Marshall Street, Gary, Indiana, advised Albert Osborne, her brother, was born November 12th, 1889, in Grimsby, England. Parents James, obviously she has that written down wrong, because I trust the records from the General Register Office. All right. So, yeah. Parents James and Emily Cole Osborne, both deceased. Mrs. Amos said Albert Osborne attended primary schools in Grimsby, England, was subsequently employed by Grimsby Grocery Store, and enlisted in the British Army in 1808. All right, so let's see. That would be when he's 20 years old. And he served most of his enlistment in India. She said he bought himself out of the Army in 1914 and migrated to the U.S. During the same year, he settled in the South, living most of the time in unrecalled areas of Tennessee. She stated her brother was occupied as a preacher, church affiliation not known, and he was also engaged as a actor and lecturer involving places and speeches on India. She stated Albert married, wife's name and whereabouts being unknown, had one son reportedly killed in action in the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II, has a daughter-in-law and a grandson in the United States, whose names and whereabouts unknown. She stated Albert once lived in Laredo, Texas, address and occupation not recalled. She had some vague knowledge that he is affiliated with the Christian Association and fulfilled engagements making talks on India. She stated that at one time he was affiliated with an unrecalled boys' camp in the South, possibly Tennessee. She remembers in Albert's infrequent correspondence and letters that he frequently traveled to Mexico, crossing at Laredo and El Paso, Texas, but recalls no information regarding possible travels to Canada, Spain, or Scotland. Mrs. Amos recalls Albert formerly lived in New York City at Washington, D.C., address unknown, and does not know whether Albert is a naturalized United States citizen. Mrs. Amos was unable to supply any information regarding Albert living in Canada or about possible Canadian citizenship. All right. Oh, there's more. So obviously she doesn't know that he has Canadian citizenship because he had to get a Canadian passport to get back to England. All right. Mrs. Amos has not seen Albert in over 20 years, at which time she visited her. He visited her home in Gary, Indiana, for one night. This being the only occasion she has seen him in 55 years. She recalled that at time he was involved preaching and lecturing. She said he has not been in close contact with him because of a minor disagreement regarding his borrowing money from her. She recalled that he wrote her during the 1920s requesting funds, at which time she sent him some money in care of John Howard Bowen. Wow. So he's known Bowen for like 40 years in New York. She has no knowledge of Albert Osborne using the dual identity of Bowen or ever utilizing any other name other than his true name. Mrs. Amos said she has never heard of Albert having any scientific or technical skills or being involved in oceanography or other scientific projects. She recalled that in earlier years she did not manifest some talent. He did manifest some talent as an artist and spent time sketching. All right. Now, all this is very boring when you're reading through it, but if you read through everything, okay, you really can pick out some gems and find a lot of stuff about what's going on, okay? And this is exactly, see, all these different field offices, they're sending out these agents. They don't know. I only know what they've been told. Ask him this, ask him that. Here's a briefing, whatever, a briefing paper. So they go out, they ask this information, and then they write it down, like stenographers, okay? And then they send that, they give that report to their field office boss. This is what we did today. He takes that with any other field agent's stuff that's related and sends it on, possibly to a regional office, and then definitely on to the national headquarters in D.C. And then in D.C., they've got a team working on the Oswald case, the JFK assassination case, and they're looking at this and trying to figure out, where does this fit? Where does this guy fit in all this? Who the hell is this guy? Why is he lying? Why is he going after using all these different aliases? And he obviously was sitting with Oswald the whole time. Why did he go immediately after leaving Mexico at the same time Oswald did go to New Orleans and get a new passport, and then ends up in England the day of the assassination? They're trying to figure out where all this lies. So I'm reminded of this line from this movie, Training Day, where the guy says, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove, okay? And obviously, it's kind of like a pyramid, a sales funnel. I'm in sales, and so it's sort of like a sales funnel. So you've got all these statements from people and rumors, okay, on this pyramid, okay? That's the base. And then below that, you've got stuff that you don't know about. And what I mean is, when you have statements from people, that's people that have contacted the FBI, in this case, or law enforcement. And that's what you have in statements. Okay? And they're trying to make sense of what the evidence shows, what the statements and the witnesses show. But below that is a much larger group of people that know shit, but either are too scared to talk, afraid to talk they might go to jail, afraid to talk they might get killed, or don't know that they know stuff but don't know that it's relevant, and therefore they never contact any kind of law enforcement agency. So if you want to say that sub-basement group is 1,000 people, maybe 500 contact the FBI. Okay? Out of those 500, maybe the FBI takes seriously 400. The other ones are crazy. They're mistaken. They don't know what they're talking about. They're obviously lying, whatever. Out of those 400, maybe, you got 200 that are relevant to the investigation to prove something that you can take to court. Okay? Because there's a lot of people saying stuff that, that's, you can use that information. It's actionable. You can find more witnesses from them, but you can't use in court. My hairdresser told me that she saw this person and that person told her, hearsay. You can't use that in court. So you can use that as actionable intelligence, but you can't use that to convict somebody. So you're down to like 200 people, and then you have about 100 people, witnesses that you can bring to court that have relative information that aren't lying. And then the DA looks at them and says, okay, these are our best 20 witnesses right here. We're not going to use everybody, but these guys are credible. We vetted them, and we're going to use them in court. So out of 1,000 witnesses, if people have information, they may only use 20 to try to convict somebody. Okay? So what I'm getting at is that they're developing a case. The FBI is doing what it does, but it doesn't decide who gets charged with something. Oh, and then in between that, I forgot, you got to take it to a grand jury, and the grand jury is going to decide who's credible and who's not. So you need people that are 100% on the money and can't be, discredited. All right. So what it could be is that the FBI is pursuing Osborne. They know something is not right here, but they don't know what it is, and they don't know how it connects. And if Osborne is just guilty of, handling Oswald, he wasn't exactly in on the conspiracy. What they should have done is shook down Osborne, threatened to arrest him, accuse him of participating in a conspiracy. But, again, when you do that, you open up a whole another can of worms that you may not be able to prove. Okay? Because the killers, the rogue agents of the FBI and the CIA and the Cubans, anti-Castro Cubans, and right-wing elements of the military and the racists, they've all covered their ass, and they're continuing to cover their ass. They're killing people, they're silencing people, they're burning evidence. They pre-covered their ass in the beginning, and then as things pop up, problems pop up, they're sending out people to do wet jobs to eliminate that threat. And again, that's a pyramid also. You got people at the top that know what's going on, coordinated the whole thing, paid for everything, and that filters down to different departments of different people who are isolated that don't know the other people, and don't really know who's at the top. Okay? All they know is they're in contact with one person. And this is where Osborne is at. Osborne is just one level above he's one level above Oswald. But he doesn't know who all the conspirators are. So if they arrested him, brought him in, he went and put pressure on him and say he confessed. He would only know as a limited amount of information. So if you take all that, the FBI is left with a problem, okay? And then on top of that, you've got the president telling Justice Warren that, hey, we need to shut it down just to Oswald, because if it comes back to the Cubans and the Russians killed Kennedy, it's going to force me into a war, and that means nuclear war. That means millions of dead people. So we need to shut it down just to Oswald, lay the blame at his feet, and that's it. And we'll save, now if you want to go on a hunting expedition and find out everybody involved, it may come back to the Cubans and it may come back to the Russians. It wouldn't, but that's the spin he's putting on it, scaring the hell out of Warren. I mean, do you want to be responsible, Justice Warren, for the deaths of billions of people, the end of civilization, over one guy? If we can just nail Oswald, you'll save 1 billion people. Come on, Justice Warren, baby. Don't tell me no. Okay? And I'm sure they could have applied other types of pressure that, hey, your son just got drafted to Vietnam. Hey, your sister just got raped. It's so horrible that happened. Not your sister, your daughter. Your kid at school just got beat up or almost ran over on the way home. Your wife got mugged at the grocery store, leaving the grocery store to go to the parking lot. That's horrible. Those things happen. That's how serious people are acting, okay? So, but he's hoping, and it works. Billions of lives, Mr. Warren. It's up to you. You want to go on a hunting expedition, you go right ahead. But God knows where it's going to lead. Because once you start down that path, we can't stop it. And if it leads to the Cubans or the Russians, it's World War III. So that was Warren's commission right there, to go out and gather the evidence proving Oswald did it and Oswald did it alone. But somebody on the commission decided, hey, we don't want to look like a bunch of fools. Here's the FBI pursuing this guy, but they shut this down too. Okay? The commission gets going about March or April of 1964, and we're already into February. The FBI is still continuing to investigate. Very interesting. All right. All right, so it says, Mrs. Amos stated Albert Hess brothers Arthur Osborne, date of birth April 9th, 1882, resided Horncastle, Hope Castle, England. Walter Osborne, born 28 March 1868. Wow, he's really old. God, he's got to be 90. Yeah, by 1964, let's see, he's 96. Good Lord. Residing Old People's Home, Scather Road, Scather, England, and sisters Rosetta Gell, born 19 May 1886, residing 87 Shetlers Road, Cleethorpes, Lincolnshire, England. Mrs. Flurry Bond, born 9 July 1864, resided. Other sisters and brothers are Rhonda, Will, Jim, Frank, Abbott, deceased. Wow, that's a lot of kids. Mrs. Amos related that her sisters Rosetta Gell, Florrie Bond, Emily Featherstone have been in closer contact with Albert and might be able to furnish further recent information regarding his activities. On February 17th, 1964, Special Agent Irvin B. Bruniga, Birmingham, Alabama, viewed photographs of Albert Osborne taken October 1963 and reported that, in his opinion, that person is identical to John Howard Bowen. You see? That's why I don't understand that they didn't arrest him. But see, if they had arrested him, that would have come out in the news media, and the news media would have been saying, well, who is this guy, and why are you arresting him, and what does he have to do with Oswald, and is there a conspiracy involved? And who else is involved in this conspiracy? And then Pandora's out of the box. World War III is at the doorstep. Okay? Whether you believe Johnson really believed the World War III story, or he's just making it up to divert attention away from rogue agents, or maybe he's a part of the conspiracy, I don't know. All right. So Mrs. Pamela Lillian Mumford furnished the following information. She continues to be employed as a legal stenographer at Delaveau and Cox Attorneys, 611 Wilshire Boulevard, room 700, Los Angeles. She resides at the Jacqueline Apartments, 153 North New Hampshire Avenue, apartment number 212. I don't know who this lady is. Ms. Patricia Winston, who has her former roommate, who was her former roommate. Okay. And with whom she traveled around the world, departed Los Angeles on January 21st, 1964, is presently residing with her parents at Flat 4 number in Sydney, Australia. Okay, these are the two Australian girls, or three Australian girls. 3 photographs of Albert Osborne, also shown as John Howard, were displayed to Mrs. Munford. The first photograph was taken October 1963 in connection with his passport application and shows his head and shoulders. He is wearing a white shirt. The second and third photographs were taken on February 8th, 1964. I wonder where they got that. And he is wearing a dark suit, white shirt, and striped tie, and is holding a pipe in his right hand. These are stand-up, full-face, and profile pictures. Upon viewing these photographs, Mrs. Munford advised that she was positive that this individual was identical to the man whom she had seen and sat next to Lee Harvey Oswald on the bus which had come from Nuevo Laredo, and which she and Mrs. Winston had boarded at Monterrey, Mexico on September 26, 1963, and which arrived in Mexico City on September 27th, 1963. During that time, Mrs. Munford was on the bus. Oswald sat next to this man, whom had previously described him as the Englishman. All right, so we're going to stop right here, and I'm going to switch over to something I haven't done for a while about embassies and security. All right, so we're going to do 2 embassies because these are low priority. This is the Embassy of Vietnam in Ontario, Canada. You can see, just by the fence, they have low expectations on any kind of attacks. You see? They don't have a wall. They don't have a high fence. It barely comes up right above the waist, I guess. You see? So, Vietnam, except for China, and China's not really involved in sending terrorists, although they are aggressive. But this is the Vietnamese embassy. I believe that's Vietnam. Yeah. And again, you can tell very little's going on here. I think we looked at this one last time. But yeah, see, there's the Vietnamese flag. Nice little house over there. All right, so let's see if there's another one here. And so what sometimes countries do, so if you've got like Russian or Chinese agents and you're wanting to penetrate, say, security codes at the embassy, okay? Most of the embassies are going to be using the same type of security system, telecommunication system, whatever. And anyway, so what you would do is you wouldn't go for, say you're the Russians trying to penetrate what type of communication systems the British are using. Okay, so you're not going to go after the British embassy in Moscow. You're going to find a lower security embassy, say like in Mexico City or in Japan, or I'm trying to think of another country, Slovakia, where the British are not going to, they're going to have lower security, and then you'll start staking it out. You'll figure out the car tag numbers. Maybe they even follow people. And you'll set up a situation. You see, so say they got a guy in here. Once they figure out, so at night, they'll have people that work at night, and most of that staff that works at night are going to be involved with the telecommunications and security. So they'll just tag people that have their cars at night, figure out who they are, and then look at their background and figure out if they're either security or some kind of technical degree in communications. Once they've got that figured out, then they're going to follow that person. Okay? Find out his routine, where he goes, coffee shops, restaurants he eats at, movie theaters he goes to, parks he walks his dog, all these kinds of things, and they'll set up a different, the Russians are really inventive. They'll set up some kind of scenario. Okay? He bumps into a cute girl. Maybe some cute girl is jogging by him while he's walking his dog in the park. She pretends to trip, sprain her ankle close enough to him where he can come up and start talking to her, make conversation, da-da-da-da-da. One thing leads to another. Can I get your number? Oh, you're really cute. Oh, I'm from around here. I'm Canadian, whatever. They start a relationship. Then they'll do something where they compromise him. She'll push his buttons, getting mad, and he'll hit her. She'll plant drugs on him and then have fake police drug agents come in that are actually Russians and threaten to arrest him unless he cooperates. Okay? And there's a million different things that can happen. Okay? To compromise this person. The guy is not going to want to give up his job or tell people that he's been compromised. Okay? Or maybe he's in love with the girl or whatever. And she'll say something, hey, look, all I want you to do, or they'll say, all we want you to do is attach this device or run this USB in your computer, and it'll run it through your system, and then bring us back the USB. And that'll implant some kind of virus. And, and it's much easier nowadays. They don't even have to do any of that stuff. A lot of times they can just send an email, a phishing email, and it'll take over the computer. Hey, look at the cute kitties or whatever. And someone will click on the picture of the kitty, and then it'll secretly download some kind of monitoring software that they won't even be aware of. But most embassies have some kind of computer technical antivirus staff that'll find that stuff. But that's exactly what happened to John Panetta. He clicked, they said, hey, someone hacked your computer and found your password. Please click on here and re-sign in and change your password. And when he did that, he gave them access to his email. Once they had that, they had everyone else's email. That's how they were able to implant a device there. But they could do something as nefarious as that. Watch the Americans. They do this all the time, sexual compromise. And, they did this one thing with this Korean guy. She had gone after the Korean guy's wife, became friends with her, and then somehow she got in a situation with the husband, and then she faked, she put something in his drink. He wakes up, she's naked in the bed, and she's like, "Oh my God, what did you do? You raped me," and all this kinds of stuff. And then they faked that she had committed suicide. The family comes in there. They're wanting money and all this kinds of stuff, and then they fake the injury of these elderly people, and so her brother goes with the Korean guy to get some money, and while he's gone, they're just rifling through all of his paperwork, files, putting stuff on his computer, all this stuff. They're just really, really good at it. And then the guy brings him back, and then the guy's not going to tell anybody, okay, because this woman he got pregnant, supposedly she committed suicide, and all, he's never going to mention any of this stuff, okay? So these kinds of things happen, and they happen very quietly. People don't talk about them because they have careers and family, and they don't want to get divorced. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to go to jail. And they're only found out when somebody gets caught or does an investigation, or somebody defects and brings over names of these compromised agents, and they get exposed that way. All right. Let's go on to another embassy here. All right, so you can see here, this is the Saudi embassy. They've got a pretty well-protected area, okay? They've got it on a main drag. You see here? There's cameras on light poles here, there, and you see how they've got... So first what they've done is they put up security barrier. This concrete probably got metal pylons going a couple feet down into the ground, and they're all connected with cabling. That's to prevent like a truck bomb. Boom. Okay? If it blows up, it's just going to blow up these trees. And then they put in the trees to add extra protection against a truck bomb, but also to hide visibility of anybody looking into the embassy. And then you get a little closer here. You see they've got this. This used to be some kind of entrance, and then they've taken that off. And then you can see, that's been closed for quite a while. See the grass. So the entranceway is probably around the front. This used to be the front, and now they just use this for deliveries. You see they got this type of glass. See how the windows are thinner? This is to prevent, breakage. And see they've got bars down here. I'm surprised how, you see this little concrete is just high enough that if a truck rams into it, it's not going to move. It'll bust into this a little bit, but it'll stop it. And then these windows here are Kevlar. You can tell by the reflection that they're Kevlar there. And see how these windows are thinner? They've got some kind of patio for ceremonies up here. And you notice that's behind the windows, or behind the trees. Let's see what else we have here. Kind of the same thing over here. You'll see the Saudis, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they don't like them, and so they're going to do what they can to fuck with them, okay? Now, I don't know if this is part of the Saudis. Let's take a look. What is this? It says the obligation of the something. I don't know if that's related to them. I don't know what that is, but all right. So let's go around here. Oh, wait a minute. That's really, really far. Wow, why does it keep doing that? Hold on one second. See, it says delegation of the Ishmael Imamat. This is probably some kind of religious organization, I guess, that's probably sponsored by the Saudis. This is inside whatever this is. What the hell is this? I'm not even... Is this an art museum? Or is this a mosque? I don't know what this is, but anyway, it's probably something to do with the Saudi embassy also. Alright, so we go around the corner. You see? There's the corner there. And let's see, what is that? Yeah, there's some kind of telephone exchange. That's kind of weird to have your telephone exchange sitting up there like that. They probably have secure lines. I saw some satellite dishes, so they're probably using that to communicate. Yeah, see? Got more bushes. I'm sure they got cameras everywhere. You see they have that blurred out, so there's something important right there. We're probably coming around to where there's some kind of back entrance for visas that people, I don't know why you'd want to get a damn visa to Saudi Arabia, but, and see how this guard shack's like a little bunker right there, and they're obviously not using that entrance. You see how it's not maintained? Yeah, wow. Security up the yin-yang. And see, he's got this big-ass window. It's probably bulletproof, rocket-proof, but you can see him right there. He can look out and see anybody coming. All right, let's go down a little further. Yeah, see, they've got, you know, the walls and then the trees. They've grown up over the years. And yeah, this is probably the visa entrance right there, that you go in and get your visa. God knows why you would want to get a visa to Saudi Arabia. All right, we'll go down. Oh, can't. Yeah, can't go down that road. So that's the Saudi embassy, and you know, a lot more secure than the one in Mexico. But you know, every country is going to have a security rating, a risk rating. Okay, they're going to evaluate that country for that embassy in that country and decide this is how much security we need. We need more. We need less. Whatever. All right. Let's see. Let's check out one more. We still got about 17 minutes. Let's see. Saudi Arabia. All right, hold on one second. All right, so here's the Belarusian embassy, and it's kind of near that Saudi embassy. But all right, it's like kind of downtown here. All right, let's take a look from here. I'm always amazed, like, you know, Canada, their cities are so much nicer and cleaner than in America. They really put us to shame. Let's see, let's try from this angle. Yeah, look at those buildings. Wow. So it hold on one second. It says it's right there. So this is some kind of hotel or office complex. So it's probably up in here. Yeah. Yeah, look at these. Wow. Auto was pretty nice, huh? All right, so that's enough for now. Let's try one more. What do we have here? South Africa. We'll do South Africa, and then we'll move on to the next country, which is going to be the USA. That'll be fun. So I like to do this. It's a lot of fun. I find it very fascinating, the embassies and the different amounts of security. Just like a little hobby of mine that I do. I guess it goes back to when I was a kid. I was about 18. We're touring around Washington, D.C., and then we just started going up Massachusetts Avenue, going to all the embassies and asking for tourist information. And it was just fascinating to me, the embassy, and all this stuff and all you had to go through and all that. That was really, really cool. Is this South Africa? South African High Commission. Yeah, so that's it right there. So they have a little bit more security. I don't know why. I mean, when's the last time you ever heard of a terrorist attack against South Africa? But, yeah, especially in Canada. Let's see. Yeah, see, look at that. There's the internet. There's the electricity box. That's the telephone box. God knows why you'd want that out there in the open like that. I would want my electricity and security box to be inside my wall. And then if the electric guy wants to come by and read my meter, which they have these smart meters, they don't have to do that anymore. But if they do, or work on that, they've got to go inside. But, All right, and then there's kind of their side gate. And they've got something going on right there because they got it all blurred out. So what I found out about these blurs is that, you see here it's not blurred. But you have to make a request to Google and give them a good reason why you want that blurred. There's somebody's house. Maybe that's the ambassador. And they'll blur it out for you. All right, so we're going to pick up again back on Albert Osborne. We got about 50-something pages. We're going to go through all of them. I find it totally fascinating. Apparently the FBI and the Warren Commission did also. All right, take care. Bye-bye.